What are the criticisms of implicit bias research? What are the criticisms of implicit bias research? This topic is essential, especially when discussing liberal ideology, social justice, and racial justice. Implicit bias research aims to uncover unconscious attitudes that influence behavior and decision-making. However, it has faced several criticisms that merit attention. One major concern is related to measurement challenges and reliability. Implicit bias is often assessed using the Implicit Association Test, which looks at automatic associations between concepts like race and positive or negative traits. Critics argue that these tests often show low test-retest reliability. This means that an individual's scores can change significantly over time. Such variability raises questions about whether these tests measure stable traits or just fleeting states. Since implicit bias operates unconsciously, measuring it directly is tough. Self-report methods often fall short because people might alter their responses to appear unbiased. Another criticism focuses on predictive validity and real-world impact. Many researchers have found that implicit bias measures do not effectively predict actual discriminatory behavior. The correlation between implicit bias scores and real-world biased actions tends to be small. Some scholars suggest that while implicit biases do exist, their direct influence on behavior may be limited or dependent on context. This raises concerns about overstating the role of implicit bias in explaining social inequalities or individual acts of discrimination. Contextual and conceptual issues also come into play. Research indicates that implicit bias is less stable over time compared to explicit bias. Situational factors can significantly influence implicit bias measures, complicating interpretations of an individual's true biases. Furthermore, critics argue that implicit bias scores do not solely reflect bias. They may also capture other cognitive processes, making it challenging to isolate implicit prejudice from other mental operations. There is also concern about the overhype and misapplication of implicit bias research in public discourse and policy. Findings are sometimes presented as more conclusive than the evidence supports. This can lead to misguided policies or ineffective interventions. When initial claims fail to replicate or produce expected outcomes, it can undermine public trust in the research. Lastly, while some studies suggest that implicit bias can be temporarily altered through interventions, many manipulations yield minimal or short-lived effects. This limits the practical application of implicit bias research in creating lasting social change. It highlights the need for more rigorous studies to identify effective strategies. From a liberal perspective focused on racial justice and equality, these criticisms do not negate the importance of implicit bias research. Instead, they highlight the need for careful interpretation, ongoing refinement of measurement tools, and cautious application in policy and practice. Recognizing these limitations encourages a balanced approach that integrates implicit bias research with broader efforts to address structural and explicit forms of discrimination.